This is Chick2Chick Uncut, raw and unfiltered.
So I'm really excited to do this podcast for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think it's going to be a lot of fun to make mozzarella cheese from scratch. You might be surprised. There are very few ingredients involved, but it's really fun. So I think you're going to be entertained in this podcast. But this podcast also has an educational element. You might be surprised how differently food is made in Italy versus here in the States. You're also going to learn when you're out purchasing cheese what ingredients you should be looking for on the label to make the smartest choices for you and your family, and really to make healthy choices for you and your family. So again, we're going to have fun here, but you're going to learn a lot. So we're going to make the mozzarella. Now, before any of you think that I'm making fun of Italians, I absolutely am not. My parents are immigrants. They're right off the boat. I'm very proud to be an American, but I'm also very proud of my Italian culture and heritage. I like to celebrate it, and anybody who knows me knows that I do a mean imitation of my mother, who still has a very thick Italian accent. So we're all just going to have fun here as we make the mozzarella with my guest today, Rin Caputo. She is with Caputo Brothers Creamery. Rin, I am so excited to have you on this podcast and to make it the mozzarella. So thanks for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. We're excited to make mozzarella for your followers today.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Before we get into it, give me a little bit of background. You guys are cheese makers. And how did you get into this business of making cheese?
Well, it was really by accident. I mean, we, kind of had this crazy idea. My husband and I, very shortly after we got married, actually the second day of our honeymoon, my husband woke up and he said, I don't want to do sales anymore. I want to do something radically different. And he said he wanted to become a chef. And so we went on this journey right after we got back from our honeymoon, and we found this culinary school in Calabria, so the toe of Italy, right on the coast in a little town called Posteraro. And we both quit our jobs. I was in IT at the time, and we really we moved to Italy and thought we were going to open restaurants and we were going to be Italian chefs, and we would come back to the US and kind of learn, share everything that we had learned. And one of the things that we learned while we were there was how to make cheese. In fact, the first time I ever made mozzarella was in Soverato with our good friends, the Macris. And we fell in love with it. And when we came back to this country and we were really working on menu development, still kind of thinking that we were going to be chefs, we started to make mozzarella in our home because we could not find the cheese that would make our recipes work the way they had while we were in Italy. And as an American, I think it's really easy to just think, oh, well, that's because everything's better in Italy, right? Like the food is it's just always better there. So of course it's not going to be the same. But the more we started to make our own mozzarella at home, the more we started to figure out there's a real difference here between the mozzarella and, quite frankly, the ricotta that is made in the United States and the mozzarella and the ricotta that's made in Italy. And once we really, identified what that was and really had that understanding, it became almost like we felt like it was our cross to bear. Like we had this information and we knew this was an injustice and we needed to fix it. And so that was when we once again kind of made this massive change. We quit the restaurant jobs that we had. We stopped working on developing a restaurant. We moved with our family up to central Pennsylvania, and we started making cheese. And that was almost 14 years ago.
And you're still doing it 14 years later. Okay, so let's start to make the mozzarella. As you get started and talk to us and walk us through all of this, you brought a lot of interesting points up, but let's start with the cheese making. What are you doing right now?
So I'm working with our curd. We call it kapelmats. Essentially, when my husband Dave and I opened this business, our original thought was we would just make fresh mozzarella, or as the Italians call it, fior di latte, which is the cow's milk version, right? So by Italian law, in order to be considered fresh mozzarella, you have to use the milk of a water buffalo that was born, raised, calved, and then milked in a little region just north of Naples called Caserta, or a little region just south of Naples called Battipaglia. Essentially, if you're not all of that by Italian law, you are not mozzarella. Instead, yeah, I know, they have such strict rules. And literally, people go to jail if they try to put cow's milk in there instead of water buffalo. And nobody should be thinking about an American bison right now. The water buffalo is actually a little different. They kind of look like a tiny rhinoceros with the horns of a ram. There you go.
So, and what is a curd? It's what? Ricotta that's gone bad? What's the curd?
Good question. So no, ricotta actually means recooked in Italian, and ricotta is actually recooking the whey that's left over. So here we start with cow's milk, which is why I called this fior di latte instead of mozzarella. So we get cow's milk from local dairy farms. We bring it here, we heat the milk to pasteurize it, and then we add a very important ingredient. And this is, as you were referring to, kind of what makes the difference between American style mozzarella and Italian style mozzarella. And it really comes down to this one ingredient. And if you don't remember anything else I say today, this is the word I want you to remember, and that's culture.
Culture.
That's right.
Got it.
Culture. You got it. So culture is really just a fancy way of saying bacteria. And essentially, if you think of if you get yogurt and you see that it's got all of these probiotics and it's got this lactobacillus that you'll see on there, that essentially is what removes the lactose. It's what performs the fermentation of the milk. It takes the milk from being fresh to being curdled, but we're doing it in a way that is safe and consistent. We're taking good, healthy lactobacillus that is good for our gut, that helps us process the lactose. In fact, most people don't realize if they have a lactose intolerance, that they can tolerate real cheese, because real cheese has been lactose-free for thousands and thousands of years. The process of adding these cultures consumes the lactose and converts it into lactic acid. And that's where that curdling starts to happen in the milk. And then we add an enzyme called rennet, which does the coagulation. And so essentially that coagulation takes all the solids, or a lot of the solids, out of the milk. We get the curds, and that's what I have here. And then the whey really just has one main solid left in it, and that's called albumin. And when we recook the whey, we get ricotta. So from one thing of milk, we get curds and ricotta.
And why are you taking it apart right now? Why are you pulling it and turning it into smaller pieces?
It's a good question. So this was actually milk this morning. And so our cheese making team here, we now have about 20 employees. We're in Spring Grove, Pennsylvania. So they come in every morning around 2:30, and they start to heat the milk and add these cultures, as I mentioned, and they get us to this curd state. And essentially that comes together as a big block. But to finish the cheese, and really in its truest form, curd just means unfinished cheese. Mm-hmm. So for mozzarella, or for provolone, which is just an aged mozzarella, essentially to finish that curd, we have to heat it and we have to stretch it. In Italian, they're literally called pasta filata cheeses, pasta filata, which means stretched dough, because it kind of looks like dough when we stretch it. If this was a cheddar cheese curd, then the way I would finish that is by pressing it and aging it. So that's kind of the difference, is that curd it's cheese, it's just in its youngest kind of unfinished form, if you will. And so
Go ahead. Keep going.
In order to heat this up, I need to break it into smaller pieces so that each of the pieces of curd kind of heat up at the same level. So that's why I've broken this up into like acorn-sized pieces, about the size of a nickel or maybe like a quarter, if you will. And then I added salt.
Okay.
And so what that salt's going to do is it's just going to season the cheese curd so that I've got a nice consistent flavor throughout. And I'm just going to, and one of the fun things that you get the benefit of seeing right now, and I know we're getting close to Easter and everyone's getting excited for spring now that Easter is a little later this year, but because we've had a few warm days where the spring grasses are starting to come in and the wild garlic and onion chive that we have in our area is starting to come into the fields, I can actually tell that this has a little bit of a yellow hue to it. And that's because we're already starting to get some of the lushness that comes into the milk in the springtime. So very exciting, very delicious cheese made this time of year.
And what's the next step? So basically we have the curds and you have the salt, and now what?
Now I'm going to add hot water, and this is going to be added in two phases. So the first phase, we're really just trying to temper, to warm up the curds, right? So we broke them into smaller pieces, and now we're going to add 190-degree Fahrenheit water. So some pretty hot water. 212 is boiling, and you can see there's already little strings that are starting to form here, and that's what I'm going to get the first time around. And I'm going to vigorously stir for about 20 or 30 seconds until I see those strings starting to develop. And then I'm going to pour that first dose of water off. Well, most of it. I'm going to pour about 2/3, 3/4 of the water off. Leaving
So
the
you
rest
got rid of the water, but not the curds and the salt mixture. You just got rid of the water, correct?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I left a little bit in there, and now I'm going to add a second dose of hot water. Now, the first time I added the hot water, you might have noticed I just added it directly to the curds, and I wasn't very careful. The second time around, I'm going to be very careful. So instead of, vigorously stirring, I'm just going to gently push the curds over to one side. And now, so I started by breaking the curds apart so I could heat them up evenly. Now I want the curds to come back together. And I can see that as they come together,
Oh, yeah.
they will start to stretch. And we call this the waterfall stretch.
Now, you were very specific about the first water being 190 degrees. What about the second water that you added? Was it the same temperature? Was it hotter? What was it?
Same temperature. So
Okay.
the curds are a little warmer. For my scientists, I love my food scientists. So for the food scientists at home that's watching, we're really looking to get an internal temperature of about 132 degrees. 135 degrees Fahrenheit. So the curds coming out of the refrigerator are usually about 40 degrees. The first dose heats them up to about 100. The second dose will heat them up to about 135. There we go. And you can see as the curds heat up, that stretch gets even better. And essentially what we're doing is we're elongating those proteins. And this is why mozzarella has that wonderful mouthfeel. It's also why it melts perfectly on pizza. And
It is really, really good. And essentially, when you break this down, why does it taste so much better in Italy than it does here in the States?
It's a great question, and really something that perplexed me for a long time until I figured it out. And this is something that I find most Americans have experienced at some point in their life. They just didn't realize it, right? Because they thought they were doing the right thing. They go to the grocery store, they get the little pillowy ball of mozzarella that's floating in water. There's Italian flags on the packaging. So it's got to be the real deal, right?
It has to be the real
It
deal.
has to be. First, they bring it home, they slice it up into little circles, they put it on a pizza. They're so excited to be making homemade pizza. They put it in the oven, it goes in as perfect circles, it comes out as perfect circles. And for some reason, it doesn't have the texture or the flavor that you would expect it to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, it kind of has a kind of a plasticky texture, and it's really just the flavor just isn't there that we get from other cheeses. And so the reason for that is, if we go back to the beginning and this word I told you to remember, let's see, did you remember what it was?
It started with a C, and it is culture.
You got it. That's exactly right. So, in the 1960s, essentially, some really industrious Americans, as, urban sprawl started to happen, particularly around the New York City, New Jersey area, where a lot of Italians had immigrated and settled, but then they started to spread further and further away. It became difficult for a cheese like mozzarella, which was supposed to have, supposed to be eaten really the day it was made. They really needed it to have a shelf life. But if we add these cultures, then it really makes it kind of challenging for there to be a good shelf life. And so these industrious Americans figured out that if they added vinegar or citric acid to milk at just the right moment, they could make the milk look like a cheese called mozzarella, or make the milk look like a cheese called ricotta, even though it's really still just milk. So, as a consumer, this is what you can do at the grocery store from now on. When you go and you look for your mozzarella cheese, or any cheese for that matter, first thing you should do is turn it around, look at the ingredient label. If you don't see the word culture, it's not technically cheese. And this is why when you put real mozzarella on a pizza and it goes in the oven, it melts in a million different directions, because it's cheese and cheese melts. But if it's just milk made to look like cheese, it just sits there, because it is actually scientifically proven you cannot melt milk. So it's just heating in place, and that's it. And so, the thing that just drives me absolutely crazy about this is not that it's milk and it's been disguised as cheese. It's really that as Americans, because we love to have cheese and extra cheese and have, it melted all over our pizza, what I find is that, the average American pizza has somewhere around 16 to 24 ounces. Let me put that into terms you understand. A pound to a pound and a half of cheese on it. The average Italian pizza with real cheese has about 3 ounces of cheese on it. And so, as we're looking at Italians and we're like, geez, they're eating pasta and they're eating pizza and they're just so thin. Why? Well, it's because they're eating real food, real ingredients, things that work in their belly the way that it's supposed to. And they're only eating, not even a quarter of a pound on a pizza. So it just completely changes the whole dynamic and the way that they work with their food.
Well, I've been to Italy so many times, and as I've mentioned, and my parents are immigrants, and the food is so much different. You eat it there, and it doesn't feel like there's like a big lead thing, like a lead ball in your stomach. Here, when you eat the pizza, it's like it's heavy, the cheese is heavy, the dough is heavy, and it's just completely different in Italy. And I think it all boils down to what you're saying. It's real food there. And here, there's so many other things that are added to it that A, it doesn't taste the same. B, we don't digest it. And it's just like lead in my stomach that I can't digest it.
Yeah, it's, a miracle for me. I just, every time we pick up a new pizzeria and they're using our cheese, and they just inevitably within the first few weeks, we call it the honeymoon period, because we just get constant feedback from them of how many customers are now coming in and saying to them, I can eat pizza and feel a completely different way.
Yeah.
I can have it's a freedom. It's like you said, you don't feel that just gut bomb, as I like to call it, that's just sitting in your stomach. You know, it's interesting, even if you don't have a lactose intolerance, right? So even if you can tolerate all milk, because vinegar or citric acid is added, and so they're artificially lowering the pH to get it to do this magic trick to look like cheese. So you have all the lactose, but the pH is lower. So every time you eat that pizza or anything, a caprese, let's say, made with that cheese, it actually sits in your body while your body tries to figure out how to metabolize that lactose with this artificially lower pH. And so, you know, it's just, for me, it's one of those just terrible secrets in the food world that, you know, one of my distributors calls me the mozzarella evangelist. And that's because I'm going to be out there like telling as many people as I can, look for the word culture. So the analogy that I always like to use is, you know, if people, you know, were to get grape juice, for example, in a wine bottle and pour it into a wine glass and expect it to miraculously taste like wine, it never would, right? Because we know that grape juice has to go through fermentation to become wine. This is the same thing. We can't just take milk and make it look like cheese and expect it to suddenly be cheese, right? We have to have it go through fermentation. And the only way it can go through fermentation is if we add culture. So that's the key. Culture is key.
So I'm going to say to you, as in the evangelist, preach, sister, preach. Get that message out. So let's get back to what you're doing here. You are actually now, what are you doing? Tell me what you're doing.
Yep, I'm making the balls of mozzarella. So the word mozzarella actually comes from the Italian verb mozzare, which means to break or to cut. And so I'm cooling my hands off. We like to call this water bowl the best friend bowl. But essentially what it does is if you've never had your hands in 190-degree water, let me tell you, it's hot. So we cool it off, and then we just take part of the mozzarella and make a C, and you just squeeze the tightest fist you can until you feel the cheese start to break, right? Mozzare, to break or to cut. And remove that and just transfer the palm of your hand, and that makes the perfect little ball of fresh mozzarella. And
that's it.
And that's it. That's it. It's literally that simple.
And I said at the beginning of this podcast how easy this is, and really there aren't many ingredients. Again, it was the curds, salt, and hot water. And that's all there is to it. Now, how long does it have to cool that you're putting it in that little cooling dish?
Yeah, putting it in the cooling dish really just allows it to keep its shape. But we have restaurants and chefs who never even go into the cold water. They actually go straight to the plate because they want it to still be warm. The youngest Caputo brothers, so my sons are actually the Caputo brothers, and Matteo, who's now 15, he loves it when it's still warm. So if he was here right now, he would actually be taking little balls, little bocconcini as they're called, and he would still be eating them warm. So keeping it in the cold water is just to allow it to keep its shape and to keep it, you know, if you're going to eat it, I like to say maybe, you know, leave it out on the counter 1-2 days. It actually does not need to be refrigerated. So that's something that most people don't realize. In fact, in Italy, mozzarella is typically never refrigerated. You keep it out at room temperature. It's been fermented, so the dangerous food source, lactose, has been removed, so we don't need to worry about that. And literally just eat it. If you're not going to eat it within a couple of days, then I say take it out of the water and actually just wrap it in a little bit of plastic wrap and keep it in the refrigerator. It'll dry out a little bit, not being in water, but then it's a perfect melting cheese for making pizza or for putting in a pasta if you're going to do like a baked ziti, something like that. And so, yeah, that's it.
So, Rin, tilt the plate just a little bit so we can get a better idea and we can see how you've created those balls. Just tilt the plate towards the camera that has the mozzarella in it. And there you go.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
and,
let's
and just
actually
place. I'll tell you what, I have to let everyone know when you came to our organization, I'm a member of the Order of the Sons of Italy, our Central Pennsylvania Lodge. Shout out to my members there in our Central Pennsylvania Lodge. You made the cheese and you cut it and you let us sample it, and I've never had it warm. I'm telling you what, I could have eaten that entire bowl. It melted in your mouth. It tasted incredible, and it took me right back to Italy.
Oh,
Like
I love
that was the real deal. It was so good. It's so delicious, and it really, it's so easy to make. You know, and I also want to talk to you about the wine in Italy versus the wine here in the States. And I try to
Sure.
tell everybody it doesn't taste the same. When I drink red wine here, I get a headache. I don't feel good. So please back me up with this, sister. Tell us. Preach, sister, preach. There's a difference.
There is, and there's a lot of things that go into that, right? So, the the saying that most of the Italians have is that old world wines, like most of those made in Europe, particularly in Italy, are made in the field, which means that as you're drinking the wine there, you're really drinking the wine and the grapes as they were grown, and really how the farmer managed those vines, and really how Mother Nature, blessed the weather, right, with rain or no rain, sun with no sun, was there hail, that kind of thing. And New World wines, so those, let's say, made in California, are made in the winery, right? So there's a lot of tricks that they can do, and some of them aren't tricks, like aging red wine in a wine barrel is certainly not a trick, but it does impact the flavor in a significant way. And it also can change the way that your body interacts with the wine that you're drinking, for sure. And for me, there's other things that exist out there in the world, like some of the more commercialized wineries will actually take egg whites, for example, and use those to clarify the wine. Those are the wines that always give me the absolute worst headache. Or you'll find that in Italy, and this, Flora, from traveling there, when you sit down to a meal, there's always a bottle of water, or 12, right, on the table, sparkling water and still water. And, I just find that I'm so much more hydrated when I'm there. I'm really just, I'm drinking wine with some amazing food, a balanced diet, good gut health, and great water. And you put all of that together, include a passeggiata before dinner where you're walking and getting those steps in. It literally is la dolce vita, right? It's just the good life in all the right ways.
And you know what? For being an IBM, which you know what that means, Italian by marriage, you're pronouncing these words spot on.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I always say, if I say ricotta, for example, I'm like, I'm not trying to be the snobby Italian girl because I'm Irish, which is why I'm I always look good in green, let's say. But my father-in-law, who's 100% Italian, he used to always say to me, he was like, Ren, you're the most Italian member in the family. And I think that's because, I was very blessed. I got to go to Italy at a very young age. I was a military brat, so grew up for a time in West Germany. And when we were studying the Renaissance, they put us all on a bus in sixth grade and took us to Italy. And, I was hooked it was a place that spoke to my soul, as I think it does so many other people. It just makes sense. I can't tell you, we have a travel company and we take people to Italy. And so many times people will say to me, like, in my mind, I knew wine, as you said, was supposed to be like this, or I knew cheese was supposed to be like this, or I knew pasta was supposed to be al dente, or vegetables were supposed to be, lightly cooked and fresh and seasonal. And so they were supposed to have flavor, or a peach was supposed to taste, like a summer peach. And I think that's what Italy still has, right? It still has this essence that just takes all of the good things and just reminds you that that's what life can be. And so when we travel there and we go there and we eat there and we drink there, it just fills our cup and our soul in a way. And it doesn't matter what your heritage or your background is. As soon as your cup is filled one time in Italy, you're Italian.
We'll take you. I feel like you sum it up this way too. I feel like in a lot of ways here in the States, we're existing, and they're in Italy, they're living. They're making the most of every single day, and they're eating real, good, fresh food. And I'm so happy that you decided to come on the podcast to make the mozzarella. And yeah, and I know you guys sell it in your store, and if people don't want to make it, but they want to come to your store or your website, how do they get in touch with you?
Yep, so just hop on Caputo Brothers Creamery.com, all spelled out. And on there, you'll find all of the cheeses. You can either make them yourself. We've got virtual classes that it's me literally in your own home teaching you how to make mozzarella, or teaching you how to make burrata. That's another fun one folks like to make. You can even make your own little provolone that you could, if you've got a wine fridge, you can age a little bit of your own cheese. But all of our cheeses, including ricotta, coming up for the Easter season, will be, in fact, I just heard from my production team today, everybody's already adding ricotta onto their menus. So we're making, this is our busy time of year for making ricotta. Everybody loves it. I mean, what's not to love, right? A good cannoli, a good ricotta cookie. It's all good.
Oh, and my favorite is the ricotta pie, which is like a cheesecake, but it's made with ricotta. It is fantastic. It's one of my favorites. Rin, I cannot thank you enough for coming on and having some fun with us, and of course educating people too. There is a big difference, and I know that one word. Let's say it again. It's culture.
There you go. Perfect.
Thank you, Rin. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Ciao.
Thank you. Ciao, Bella. Thank you. Well, I hope you guys had fun watching the podcast. I hope you had a lot of fun making homemade mozzarella, and you see how easy it is. It really was only 3 ingredients, just the curds, the salt, and the water. And again, the educational element. The food is made so differently in Italy than it is here in the States. And as Rin said, when you're purchasing cheese, look for that word, culture. Then you know it is real cheese. So thanks again for tuning in. Please do me a favor, head over to our YouTube channel, like and subscribe. That way, every time we come out with a new podcast, you're going to get a little alert again on our YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. Thank you so much, and we'll be back soon with a new podcast episode.